The Lowell Security Twitter account announced that they had finally gotten around to actually making a web page. What was pretty amazing was that within about 15 minutes that web page was knocked offline by a fairly significant denial of service attack. I don't know the details of this particular attack because we hadn't been involved yet. About an hour after the web page was first announced, Lowell's announced that they had actually solved this problem on a Twitter account. And the only thing that had changed, as far as I've been told, is that 9 minutes earlier they signed up for Cloudflare. Now Cloudflare doesn't, we're a service, we make websites faster and we protect them from some attacks, but we don't really think of ourselves as an anti-DDoS service. So it was somewhat of a surprise for the Lowell security people to do that. It was even more of a surprise when an hour later Lowell security sent out a message to me saying, hey, we love your service so much, can we exchange RUM for a free pro account? I had no idea who Lowell Security was at this point, and so I tweeted back a tweet which my legal counsel has since told me to remove, which said, it depends on how many cases and how good the RUM is. They never sent the RUM, and we never gave them a pro account, but Cloudflare is free and thousands of sites sign up for it every single day, and we typically don't have problems with them. These guys we had some more issues with. And so over the course of the next 23 days, they wreaked mayhem in lots of different ways. And finally, on June 25th, they called it quits. And what was interesting is that the way Cloudflare works, we're a reverse proxy, right? So all of the traffic which goes to Lowell Security passes through our network first. Which has two significant effects. The first is anyone who attacks Lowell Security was attacking us, so that was amusing. And then secondly, it meant that Lowell Security was actually able to hide where their origin was, where they were actually hosting from, and that's a side effect of how our system is designed. But it was one that they used to great effect. Sam actually contacted me a little while ago. He said he was going to do a talk on DDoS, and we sort of talked about the experience, and he said, would I be willing to share some information about it? And again, we have legal counsel, and we're a real company, and we have a privacy policy, and even if you're an internationally wanted cyber criminal, we try to respect the privacy policy. And so I wrote the following email. There's a little bit more to it, to the email account that we had on file for Lowell Security on July 2nd, right after they had called it quits, saying, hey, I've been invited to talk about this at DEF CON. Would you mind? And I didn't hear anything for quite some time. And then 11 days later, someone by the name of Jack Sparrow so here I am. So I can talk about some things. I can't talk about everything. I can talk about things writ large. I can talk about how they affected us. I don't want to get the hosts necessarily that they were using in trouble, so I'm not going to be revealing their exact IP addresses. But let me tell you a little bit more about what happened over those 23 days. So this is the actual traffic to Lowell Security's website. Over those 23 days, they received a little over 18 million page views as people went to that site. You can see it peaked early, and then it's trailed off since then. The website is still actually on Cloudflare, although the website behind it has been taken down. So if you go to it today, you'll see an Apache configuration page. I don't know what they have planned next. What's interesting is that we can actually look at what is just the attack traffic and break that down. And I'd say that this attack traffic up until the spike, kind of in the middle there, was almost just background noise. It was not something that we were particularly concerned with. And in fact, what I say on a slide in a couple of seconds is that the 3 weeks that Lowell Security were on Cloudflare was actually 3 of the quietest weeks for denial of service attacks that we had seen, which is strange because a lot of people were saying that they were attacking them. There was this one spike in the center, but that seems to have been caused by a couple of very distinct events that they engaged in, and I'll talk about what that is, and then I'll talk about exactly what the sort of attacks that we saw against Lulz, and what we did to defend ourselves, and then the ones that were sort of annoying to us. So one thing that was particularly interesting, this is on June 25th, this is the jester. I don't know who the jester is. Sam's given me some background. He publishes a web page. He spent a huge amount of time trying to figure out what the backing, where the Lulz security site was hacked, and he proudly pronounced what has become gospel, which was that www.lulzsecurity.com was at 204.197.240.133, and lulzsecurity.com was at 111.90.139.55. I know where the site was on June 25th, and I will tell you it wasn't there at all. In fact, they used 7 different hosts over the course of 23 days. The original host was in Montreal, Canada. They were briefly in Malaysia, but it was in early June. That's the 111 address that's accurate. I don't know where the other address comes from. Most of the hosts that they used were actually US-based hosts, including one large host that specifically specializes in DDoS mitigation. Ultimately, they're using German hosting, and that's where they still are today. One thing that was interesting was that a lot of people claimed that they had found some way to knock Lulz security offline, and they posted pictures online. This is actually a service that we offer at Cloudflare, which is if your back-end origin server goes down, then we'll actually show a cached version of this, and we put an orange bar across the top that says you're viewing a cached version, sort of like if you view as cache in Google. What's interesting is that while a lot of the world was claiming that they had done this, what I think actually must have happened is that the Lulz security guys got kicked off their host, because for a brief period of time, for about a 36-hour period, what they did was they actually pointed their IP address at 2.2.2.2, which is an invalid, there's no host, there's no web server running there. I think they just picked a random IP address. And what that did was it caused our system to kick into the always online mode. That actually caused that cache version to exist for a limited period of time until that cache expired. At that point, they pointed it back to a host for a short amount of time, then pointed it back to a fake address to get it up. I am not aware of any person or any time when the Lulz security site was actually knocked offline, in spite of the fact that a lot of people were trying to do that. On the other hand, they knocked a lot of people offline, which was interesting to watch. A lot of the attacks that we saw, again, as I said, we were really surprised. We had everyone on high alert. We were watching for big attacks to come in, and the attacks that we saw were generally actually significantly less than we would have expected. Pissing off the hackers that populate Twitter is not nearly as dangerous as pissing off the Chinese cyber mafia or the Eastern European cyber mafia, or people that run really big extortion attacks. They run big DDoSes. These guys, they run, they're clever, but it's not the same league. We saw some layer 7 attacks that were relatively harmless, while Slow Loris and some of those tools are interesting to attack an individual web server. Cloudflare was specifically designed not only to stop layer 7 attacks dead, but we actually then record all the IP addresses that are committing those attacks, which just makes it, it's actually, we actually are happy when people attack us over layer 7. The more annoying attacks for us are the layer 3, layer 4 DDoS attacks that we see. But we run a network which is an anycasted network. And what that means is that we have a bunch of machines, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of machines, running in 14 different data centers all around the world, listening on the same IP address. So that tends to take distributed denial of service attacks or high volume attacks and spread them out over a very large surface area, which makes it much more difficult to launch something like that against us. What is more interesting, though, what the annoying attacks that hurt us were a couple of different things. The first was someone had a really big network and a lot of traffic, and they pointed almost all of it at us, and it happened that they were geographically proximate, or sort of network geographically proximate to our San Jose data center, and so they were doing enough bandwidth to our San Jose data center that what we did was we took all of our clients other than Lowell Security and we moved them to other data centers. No one ever noticed, but the San Jose data center for that period of time was only serving Lowell Security. Kept them online, though. Another attack which was really interesting, it's actually not a particularly big threat to most people, it was a threat to us, was using Google as a reflector. So we have special rules that are in place for Google's IP addresses in order to make sure that we're never blocking legitimate crawler traffic from coming to us. And so someone who was actually very clever found out that if they sent a lot of SYN requests with fake headers pointing back at our IP addresses to Google, Google would ACK back to those, and that actually created some issues for us internally. It was a pretty easy solution. We blocked the ACKs that didn't have a SYN attached to them, and we called our friends at Google and said, you'll never get origin traffic coming from this, so just firewall it off. And that was solved within a few minutes. But that was actually a clever attack that looked at the nature of how our system worked and challenged us based on that. The last one, which was the most annoying, someone did a thorough scan of our IP address ranges and found some exposed router interfaces that were out there, and figured out the routers that we were using, or just dictionary attacked against the routers, we're not sure, and they were able to launch attacks that actually shut down some of our routers. And they were able to bypass Anycast because those were specific to that. The solution, again, was fairly straightforward. We just blocked those IP addresses off to the outside network, but it was the attack that actually caused us the biggest problem and knocked a couple of our routers offline for a couple of minutes. But largely, again, when I compare the big attacks that we see when a client of ours gets a letter in the mail that says, "Hi, I'm the helpful Chinese government agency. By the way, we've detected on your network that someone is going to attack you. If you send us $10,000, we can probably do something about it." Obviously not a real Chinese agency, and they really can do something about it because they're launching it. Those are big attacks. These were relatively small by comparison. Sam, I think I'm losing power. So, yeah, if you can just make sure it's plugged in. So, a couple of things. I think I got it there. So, sorry about that. So a couple of things that were interesting. The first was, again, when the Jester and all those guys were attacking, that's that sort of background noise pattern. What really started to, it seems, trigger pissing people off was when the Lowell Security guys went after Minecraft. And that was the real spike in traffic, and then the drop back off in traffic was caused when they stopped attacking Minecraft. In fact, internally in our office, the biggest debates were in terms of whether we should drop them off our network or not, came from the Minecraft aficionados who said, "You're now causing me pain, and that's not cool." So I guess the lesson is that if you're going to launch DDoSes against people indiscriminately, don't pick on Minecraft. So we've watched. I have very little information on who actually the Lowell Security folks are. I will say that one of the usernames that signed up for the Cloudflare account is very, very similar to one of the usernames that's been arrested. I don't know if that means that it's just a coincidence or that they've actually been taken offline. We haven't seen much activity. They haven't moved their host around, and again, their website is down now. But it was an interesting 23 days watching kind of the attacks, and as all the world tried to take them down, seeing how we could help keep it up, for better or worse. So if this is of any interest to you, I'm East Dakota on Twitter, and we're Cloudflare. So thanks for having me.